Okay, so we'll set that right there.
All right,
Okay,
cool.
so it turns out that artificial gravity is more interesting than people think. There was a guy named Wernher von Braun who got kind of caught up in the politics of World War II. He was a German, and he was from an academic crowd that was really into rockets because they wanted to get off of Earth. But then Hitler came along and pretty much bullied him into joining the group that was working for the war effort. And he ended up the head of the guys that built the V2 rocket that blew up parts of London. But he's kind of innocent of the whole thing. He had to join the Nazi organization in order to keep doing his rocket thing, and he really didn't know how bad things were going to get. And they got really embarrassingly bad. It turns out that the Americans and the Russians knew a list of technicians, scientists, engineers, and stuff that were working for the Germans that they were competing to capture at the end of the war. And von Braun got lucky. He got with the Americans. All the technicians knew that they wanted to be captured by the Americans. They didn't want to be captured by the Russians. The Russians had kind of a nasty reputation. Kind of a thing. Von Braun ended up to be head of NASA during the Apollo program. Isn't that crazy?
That's cool.
So he proposed an idea for a centrifugal space station that looks like a bicycle tire. And in fact, it inflates, was his idea. The crazy thing is, he was way ahead of his time. He didn't really have a lot of people around him that knew as much as he did. And he was kind of flummoxing around in the dark, and he made some basic mistakes. His station would have worked, but it was really expensive, kind of crowded, and very vulnerable to space. So it was kind of a good thing that he didn't get to do it.
Yeah.
But there's a better way to do space. If you take a weight on a string and you spin it, then the weight is affected by what we're calling artificial gravity. But because you're spinning it in natural gravity, it's partially affected by the natural gravity. So what you actually have is combined gravity.
Okay.
The way you know this is if you were in microgravity and you were spinning the weight, it wouldn't matter how fast you spun it, it would be in a disk, in a flat plane.
So even if you were going really slowly,
it would still create a flat arc. Because you're in microgravity, you're not affected enough to pull it in any other direction. But because you have a centrifugal function going on in the field of 1G, you get a cone shape as you spin it. Unless you spin it very, very fast, then it'll flatten out because you're overcoming the local gravitational, natural gravitational field. Make sense? Okay. So in space, what you want is some kind of shape that allows you to have somebody living on the object that is rotating. The natural shape everybody goes through to is a ring or a cylinder. Problem with a cylinder is if you get it the wrong length, every few revolutions, it'll suddenly flip end to end really hard. Yeah, the Russians found out about it, and then the U.S. found out about it during the period of time when the Russians and the Americans were starting to make friends on orbit. We were still kind of in Cold War down on the ground, but the astronauts kind of liked each other and worked together.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's way cool. And it's still going on even with the Ukraine war. Like the astronauts worked with the Americans enough to learn to trust them with their lives because they're on a space station. One guy opens a valve, everybody dies, kind of thing. You know, you learn to either you trust them or you go home.
Yeah.
And so Von Braun's mistake was he built a space station that the entire space station would spin. If you spin a thread, right, with a big weight on it, you can break the thread if the thread's too weak.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So what if you're only allowed to use so strong of a thread? Because there's none available that are stronger than a certain amount. That's what it's like building with aluminum or steel or any of these materials in space, and you're spinning it at a very large diameter at a very high speed in order to get 1G. Now there's a reason that you want to build with a big diameter.
Mm-hmm.
You ever been on a merry-go-round
Yes.
and gotten dizzy?
I don't get dizzy very easily, but I get your point.
Okay, good. The bigger the diameter, the less likely the person is to get dizzy.
Mm-hmm.
And at 1 mile diameter, it's a really big space station, right? Way bigger than the ISS. At 1 mile, that starts to become ideal, but it also starts to become engineering-wise almost impossible to build. Because all the materials that you need to hold the space station together, the strength of the materials starts to fail at that point. Because you got to go 300 miles an hour edgewise. As if you put a train on a track that's a mile in diameter in microgravity, you would have to run it at 300 miles an hour, give or take, to get that 1G effect. So there's a problem with his space station. You either make it small diameter and people get seasick, or you spin it at a lower rotational quality and get less than 1G, which means you're not going to solve the health issues as well. Or you increase the diameter, but you find some other way to build it. You see the problem?
Yeah, and when you have limited materials and limited kinds of materials, I can see how that could be a problem.
Material science is really important to the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we should be teaching material science K through 12.
Yeah, I agree. That would be cool. I would like that class.
I think I know how to do it for the kindergartners.
Mm-hmm.
You get a bunch of blocks, all the same size, all stamped with what material they're made out of. And you get every kind of material that's not going to poison the kids.
Yes.
Right? And you have a book that the teacher reads up on in the summer before she does the class, right? Mm-hmm. And it's got more than she's going to need to know. Because the kid's going to throw a zinger once in a while. You know, they're going to have a dad who's an engineer or some shit. The kid's going to come in with some zinger question, think they get the teacher. And if the teacher comes back not knowing how to answer it, it kind of looks bad. So you want the teacher to be really well prepared. Mm-hmm. And the teacher's going to play games. Okay? Let's pretend we're playing a game and we've got a big pile of different colored blocks of different weights because of the materials they're made out of. Mm-hmm. So pick up 2 blocks.
Yeah.
And I pick up 2 blocks. And the teacher would say, okay, so did you pick up the same blocks or are they different? How are they different? Are they heavier, lighter? Do they have a different texture? Can you see through the material? Is it shiny? Is it dull? Is it brown? Is it red? Right, so you play these games with the kids, and the kids learn the vocabulary of material.
Like you would get like steel, aluminum, and wood, for example.
Totally.
And the wood would be severely lighter than the steel, and the aluminum.
What if you had 20 different kinds of woods from all over the world that were different weights, different textures? Some were oily, some were dry, some were heavy, some were light. Some had pretty patterns, some were all one color.
That would be cool.
So the kids learn, oh, I picked up 2 blocks that are both wood, but one's green and oily, and one's tan and dry, and the green oily one's heavy, and the tan one's really light, but they're still wood.
That would be cool. As like
that helps them categorize the tactile functions, right? So each year after that, you have an advantage with the kids In the first grade class, you can ask them, well, is it one of the woods? Is it one of the metals? Is it a glass? Because glass comes in all colors. You can have a bunch of glass blocks, all different colors, some clear, some translucent, some that
Opaque.
that glow under a black light.
That would be cool to take the kindergartners, and like there's a lot of cool metals that will glow under a black light. That would be so fun to have like a black light day with kindergartners.
Sure, you could do all kinds of stuff, especially like the first grade and the second grade, after you introduce them to these tactile functions, right? You get them, because you want them all to have the same vocabulary when they're talking to each other. And maybe fourth or fifth grade, you start introducing them to the safest, like shop class stuff, things like that. Now, von Braun's problem was a lot of the equipment on a space station doesn't have to be subject to microgravity, but is important. Like life support systems, we've been using that in microgravity for a long time, the synthetic stuff, the artificial processing of air and that, purifying it so there's a higher oxygen content, doing all that stuff mechanically. We've done that a long time.
Yeah.
And some plants don't need gravity. Like we've grown lettuce on the ISS and somebody ate a leaf. So there's proof that lettuce doesn't need 1G. So you can grow a lot of your plants, maybe even some of your animals, in either microgravity or low gravity. And so the strength of materials doesn't have to carry the load of that equipment.
That would be really cool. Although I wonder what the health defects would be. Would it be similar for like an animal that it would be a human?
Well, I think that scale is important. You notice how an ant can carry many times its own weight.
Whereas a human really can't.
Can't, because the scale is different. Humans can't carry that weight because at our scale, the physics comes out a little different. The laws of physics are the same, but the laws of physics are subject to scale as well. So
if you had like a chicken, it might affect them differently than if you had, like a bear on there.
Now, chickens can fly if you have a low enough G. They can actually already fly, but not very well.
Yeah.
But if you were running it at maybe half a G or a third of the G, like on the moon, they could fly in sea level air pressure. Really easy. So they might actually like it. They might actually grow big.
That might actually help them.
Yeah.